Several criminal gangs operated in the area by the 1850s, and by the 1920s, the 5 Points area was no stranger to crime or conflict. The anti-abolitionist riots of 1834 and the draft riots of 1863 both took place in the beleaguered neighborhood, and both were believed to have stemmed from Irish gangs who feared job competition from freed blacks. The Dead Rabbits riot in 1857 stemmed purely from all-out war between 2 gangs in 5 Points, the Dead Rabbits and the Bowery Boys, who counted among their ranks the infamous Bill the Butcher. When the Dead Rabbits raided and ransacked the Bowery Boys' headquarters, what followed was almost 3 days of rioting and looting on the part of not only the 2 warring factions, but of criminal gangs from all over New York City. Close to 1,000 gang members took to the streets, fighting hand to hand, with guns and with stones and clubs. In addition to the criminals, hundreds more with no connection to the gangs began a campaign of looting the Bowery. Initially, the area was home to criminal gangs of mostly Irish descent who fought over control of illegal activities in the area, such as prostitution and gambling. But as an influx of immigrants diversified the area's population, the gangs too then diversified. The 5 Points Mission and the clergy operating in the area published an account of the physical and moral condition of the area in 1854. Already besieged by crime, vice, and disease, the harrowing account would serve as only a precursor to the area's further descent into a disease and crime-choked community. While the 5 Points Gang was known for its utter brutality in the streets and in battles with enemy gangs, they were also one of the first criminal organizations to establish a country-wide network, thanks to the sharp business sense of Johnny Torrio, founder Paul Kelly's second-in-command, who would later see their empire expand to Chicago, eventually becoming the leader of the Chicago outfit. Another member of the 5 Points Gang would eventually rise to become the most powerful and influential gangster in the country.
There's no such thing as good money or bad money. There's just money. Behind every great fortune, there is a crime.
From the 13th through the 16th of May, 1929, a conference was held in Atlantic City. Its intended goal, to solidify and move forward on plans for the creation of a national crime syndicate. Jewish crime boss Meyer Lansky was married earlier that month, and Nucky Johnson and other underworld leaders convinced Lansky that Atlantic City would be the perfect place to mix business and pleasure. After all, the town had been doing just that for over 30 years. Representatives from Jewish and Italian mobs from as far south as New Orleans and Florida attended, along with heavy hitters from Chicago, like Al Capone, and New York, like Salvatore Luciano, better known as Charles Lucky Luciano. Coming of age in the 5 Points Gang, and later working for notorious gambler Arnold Rothstein, Luciano learned to make his life as one dedicated to crime, but run more like a legitimate business. Rather than using violence to achieve his goals, Rothstein taught Luciano to solve his problems with money and diplomacy. When Luciano botched a major drug deal in 1923, Rothstein advised Luciano to buy 200 expensive seats to the Dempsey-Furbo boxing match and to invite all the top politicians and mob bosses in New York. The ploy paid off, and Luciano reestablished his sterling reputation. Rothstein was said to remark,
"The more money, the louder it talks."
While some elder mafia leaders like Joe Masseria disapproved of doing business with anyone not of Italian or Italian-American descent, Luciano saw great financial gain to be had in cooperation, regardless of family or race. It was Masseria's old world ways and close-mindedness that landed his organization in the Costa Mallarese War, a brutal rivalry between outfits in Chicago, Detroit, and New York that resulted in the deaths of 60 gangsters and left Masseria's rival, Salvatore Maranzano, to declare himself the Capo di tutti capi, or boss of all bosses. Luciano quickly pledged allegiance to his former enemy, but soon murdered Maranzano and overtook the operation himself. He quickly worked to dispense with the boss of all bosses title, and with ideas from the Atlantic City Conference, he was a founder of the Commission, which was comprised of representatives from New York's 5 families and the leader of the Chicago outfit. It was a move intended to bring about new ideas of diplomacy and a system of checks and balances that would end senseless infighting and, most importantly, assure profit for all. It would put an end to rivalry and, in theory, bring about harmony in the national crime syndicate.
There is no boss of bosses, and I turned it down in front of everybody. If I ever change my mind, I will take the title. But it won't be up to you. Right now, you work for me, and I ain't in the mood to retire. Don't you ever let me hear this again, or I'll lose my temper.
While Atlantic City prospered and grew under a sparkling facade of health, leisure, and elegance, and thanks to undermining the ban on alcohol, cities like New York and Chicago began to see their poorest neighborhoods and ethnic areas fall under the control of mob rule. The criminal network that branched out from Atlantic City to Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and Chicago ushered in an almost universal system of corruption, even in some of the highest levels of political office. The kickbacks and profiteering from vice and other criminal activity saw law enforcement and legislative officials turning a blind eye to the violence and personal turmoil that was the direct result of mob activity lining the pockets of many individuals while emptying the pockets of the lower and even the newly formed middle classes. It was a system that choked communities with dangerous drugs and poorly made, even poisonous alcohol, and contributed to the financial ruin of many families, and was a factor in causing the Great Depression. Yet, even as gangsters terrorized communities, they also came to be revered as folk heroes. These gangsters gave the people what they wanted. And with such an airtight system in place, the gangsters could control their illegal operations with efficiency and immunity. Officials could be bought or killed with ease. And now that the gangs of America were organized, there appeared to be no end in sight. Long after Prohibition ended, the National Crime Syndicate continued to feed and indeed to flourish on the vices of the American people.
We have whiskey, wine, women, song, and slot machines. I won't deny it, and I won't apologize for it. If the majority of the people didn't want them, they wouldn't be profitable, and they would not exist.
join us in our next episode as we see men like Nucky Johnson, Lucky Luciano, and Al Capone rise beyond the upper echelons of political and financial rule and into the Gangster Empire and the rise of the mob.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.